Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we're going to be making something that usually I buy, and I was at the grocery store yesterday and realized that, I used my last ones last weekend. I really should buy some more. And then I remembered that we had this recipe in this book, and I'd been meaning to make it because I buy these all the time. We're going to be making Buttermilk Biscuits from It's Always Freezer Season by Ashley Christensen and Caitlin Golan. I generally buy frozen biscuits because my family doesn't usually eat a whole batch of biscuits. And so making a whole batch of biscuits in the morning is just kind of annoying, and the frozen ones are good. And actually they're better when you cook them from frozen. They rise nicely, the butter stays cold, and it all works out. So I decided I might as well go ahead and make my own frozen biscuits, because that's what this is. We're gonna be baking up some of them today, but usually we only need like 4 to 8 biscuits. Usually I make about 6, and that's enough for our family. So a whole batch of biscuits ends up with a few kind of sitting around and maybe being eaten later or going to waste. So I'm making my own frozen biscuits. I've got my oven heating to 400 because that's how we're going to bake the ones we bake today. And I've got a baking tray with some wax paper on it for the frozen ones, because we're going to freeze them until they are solid, at least 4 hours or overnight. And then when we're ready, I'll get the other tray with parchment paper on it, or just nothing. Usually biscuits are okay as long as your baking tray is decent. They don't usually stick, but I still use parchment paper. So I have measured out the flour. This is self-rising flour. I personally like White Lily. I think it's a softer flour, a softer wheat, but that might not be available everywhere. But she does call for self-rising flour. So I'm putting in some kosher salt, and we're going to mix this up just to sort of distribute it well. And I use a whisk, and that kind of gets any lumps out of it. Is kind of like sifting it, but easier. And I like easy. So there we go. Mix that in. I'm not worried about getting flour on my surface because I'm gonna have to put flour on it later. So I've got a lot of frozen unsalted butter, and I'm going to spend a little while grating this butter into my flour and salt mixture, which is why it's frozen, because it will grate better. So you probably won't see all of this, but here we go. We've done this once or twice before for a pastry crust, I think, or for biscuits. I forget, but I'll link those up here just so you can see. I like the technique pretty well, although it's a little annoying for a lot of it. She does say to sort of stir it in as you go. So I want to do that a little bit. This is much harder with this butter. I think I must have done this with just refrigerator cold butter before. Okay, so grating frozen butter was harder than grating just cold butter out of the refrigerator. So I called in the muscle in this outfit, and he took care of most of it for me. And then I put on my cut-proof glove to finish it up. Now, she does say to use a pastry blender to distribute the butter evenly in the flour, and it should have a pebbly texture. I'm like, I feel like I've already got a pebbly texture, and I'm using my hand, and it's pretty even in here. So I'm not gonna dirty my pastry cutter because I don't see a reason to. But the only other ingredient that goes in here is a lot of full fat buttermilk. So I'm supposed to pour this in and then use my hands to make a shaggy dough. So this is going to be a very full, I'm gonna do about half first and get that mixed in, because this is a very large amount of biscuit dough. And my bowl, while it is very large, it's gonna be hard to mix it if I put everything in at once. There we go. You do want to be careful and not mix it too much, because you don't want to make your biscuits tough. But now we're getting to shaggy dough. Okay, I think this is good. It's a nice shaggy dough. It's a little bit wet, but we're going to pat this out on a well-floured board. So we're gonna end up putting a little bit more flour in it. I'm gonna move some stuff around and get my assistant to flour my board for me with the same self-rising flour. So now I'm just gonna turn this out onto my well-floured counter and try to get as much dough out of here as I can. It's very sticky. Anyway, that's good. And now I'm supposed to carefully pat it into a loaf shape, incorporating more flour as needed until the dough is not sticky and easy to manipulate. So I'm gonna have to get my other hand into my flour. I think we're good. I think we're good now. It's still a little bit sticky in the center, but I'm not gonna worry too much about that. I am gonna make sure I have plenty of flour under my dough, because next we're going to be patting it out. And it is not that easy to manipulate, so maybe I was wrong. I don't want to work it too much though. So much sticking to my hands. All right, well, I think I'm gonna call that good, because I really don't want to over manipulate my dough. And now we're patting it out into a 3/4 inch thick shape. It doesn't really matter what shape it is. We're just gonna be cutting our biscuits out of this. We're about 3/4 of an inch. We did get out the ruler because we had a disagreement. And also I disagree with her about the size of the biscuits. She says to use a 2.5 inch cutter. That seemed really small to me, and I would rather have this. This is a 3-inch circle cutter. So we're gonna use this. I might make fewer biscuits out of it, but that's okay. So we're going to cut out our biscuits, as many as we can, pushing straight down and not turning. So trying to now that I've got a line, I'm gonna very carefully transfer these over to my, this is my freezing sheet where I have wax paper, and we don't want these to touch because we want them to be all individually frozen. So we're gonna try to space these out as much as we can, and I might end up needing another one, we'll see. So we've gotten 1.5 dozen so far, but now we need to re-roll the extra bits and make sure that we have enough flour on our board so that it doesn't stick. I'm supposed to gently form this into a ball, which is what I've been trying to do. There we go. Not too bad. And then pat it out 3/4 of an inch thick. There we go. So we're gonna bake these fresh ones for, she says 10 to 13 minutes. Yes, from room temperature, or from frozen, more like 15 minutes. My biscuits always take longer to get brown on top like I like them. So I just go by color, honestly. But with my 3-inch cutter, I got the 24 that she says this recipe makes, so that's okay. What I'm gonna do is just sort of form these into hand biscuits and bake them with the rest that we're baking today. These will be more freestyle. So I'm gonna put these in the freezer. Like I said, at least 4 hours or overnight. I'll probably go overnight, and I'm gonna clean this up. I'm gonna bake the biscuits we're gonna have today, and I'll show you what those look like in just a minute and let you know what we think. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make buttermilk biscuits from It's Always freezer season. And I have not yet tried them from the freezer. They're still actually freezing. I haven't put them in a zip top bag yet. So I did not bake them from frozen, but I do that all the time, and I don't think that these will be any different. I do think I may have made a mistake choosing a larger biscuit cutter because they did puff up rather a lot. So they were a relatively large biscuit with 3-inch biscuit cutter that I used. Not that we have a problem with that. And they did end up taking a lot longer to bake, even from room temperature, than she said. So she says like 10 to 13 minutes. Mine always take at least 20 minutes. And then I usually move them to the top rack after I think they're almost done, just to get them browner. I do sometimes brush them with heavy cream just to help them get brown, get a little bit browner, because the fat in that I think helps with that. I didn't with these ones, but they still ended up brown, but I think it took me more like 25 to 30 minutes to bake them, but they were larger, whatever. So there are a couple other options for this recipe to freeze them, to make them differently or to freeze them differently. So you can make them as buttermilk dumplings or gnocchi. Basically, you just cut them into small squares, freeze them like that, and then there's a recipe for chicken and dumplings using those, which sounds delicious, and we might have to do that another time because we didn't freeze any of ours that way. She also has a recipe for orange biscuits where you add some orange zest and then you make, I think you add some sugar. Anyway, this is a little bit different for the base recipe before you freeze it, and then you make an orange glaze to go over them. Those sound absolutely delicious to me, but I haven't made them yet. And also you can make sausage and cheese biscuits where you cook some sausage and mix that with some cheddar cheese into the biscuit dough before you cut them out. That sounds a lot to me like a sausage cheese ball, except in a larger biscuit form. So we've made sausage cheese balls before on this channel from Vivian Howard's cookbook, I think. Her recipe is a little different than the one I normally use, but sausage cheese balls are a big thing in the South. Sausage biscuits are also a pretty big things here in the South. But it would be, I think these would be an interesting thing for us to have on hand around the holidays, because that's when we usually do sausage cheese balls. I'd like to see how they compare to our usual sausage cheese balls. Although my husband likes them very small, and this would be very different than that. But anyway, I'm very excited that I will have my own pre-frozen biscuits to make, and the biscuits themselves were very puffy. They puffed up nicely. They were very brown. They were very tender, even though the ones that we baked today were either the first re-roll or even a second re-roll. They were still really tender. They kind of fell apart a little bit. They didn't hold together really well, but you know, you want a biscuit to be tender. You don't want it to be super glutinous. So you don't want it to be like bread. You want it to be soft and tender, because that's what a biscuit is. So I'm really excited to have these, and I hope you will try them yourselves. And if you do, let me know in the comments down below what you think. And if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.